But you might want to, yeah, you might want to tell about your dad. What kind of things you remember him most for, or whatever comes up.
Well, I was so interested in sports all my life, and so was he.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that the whole family had in common, all the boys, because, you know, we were all, the whole family was boys, had in common, because he would work all the week and play ball all day Sunday. That's as interested as he was.
Yeah.
And even in his later years, if when he didn't feel too well, if you wanted to go to a ball game, he was ready. So
he played for the old center team, was it? Or they have Montrose?
The old
team?
Creeping Jenny team. He played for Montrose too when he was about 18 years old, I guess. But and he loved machinery.
Yeah.
We were usually the first ones to have a new product that come out. He was the first one in the neighborhood to have hybrid seed corn.
Really?
Yeah. He I don't know, he liked to try something new. And his cornfield sometimes looked like a test plot. He'd try this and he'd try that kind. And he always had to have a corn sheller or a thrash machine. Even when we had our two-row corn picker, we always still had to go out and pick for the neighbors. We were the last ones done every year. Oh, I hated that. Because it would get cold, you know, you'd be sitting on that old corn picker, sometimes it was 0 outside. But he couldn't say no to somebody that wanted some customers done. But like I say, basically he was a sport. He was a good sport. He'd have a lot of fun.
Remember when he played baseball or whatever? What sort of position did he like?
I can remember just a little bit, but he was really over the hill by the time I saw him. I can remember seeing him playing away. But he evidently had been a pretty good ball player because he played with some awfully good teams when he was young.
I remember him telling about some guy that went to New York to get to be a professional, but he threw his arm out. He was trying to be a pitcher. I don't know who that was.
I think he's still, maybe he's dead too. Chuck Swindler, his name was. He was. I saw him play, but not in his prime.
Yeah.
But,
well, in midsummer, then they used to have an annual game between. Well, who was that now?
that was the old Creeping Jennies and Center.
Really? Every midsummer.
Every midsummer, yeah. It was good-natured fun. It got to be fun, really fun. And the thing about midsummer them days, it was an event. People come shortly after noon and stay all day. Those that didn't have to do chores in the evening, and even people from town used to come out. It was a huge crowd, but now there isn't that many people in the country anymore, and they have so many other things to do that you can get lonesome at midsummer nowadays.
Yeah.
Where did they play those games? Did they have pasture? Or
Yeah, I was out in the parsonage pasture. Yeah, when you got a hot grounder, you had to hope it didn't hit a gopher hole.
No extra hazards there.
Or stuck in the cow pie when you were sliding into second.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so. So you remember Grandpa with his real interest in.
Well, yeah, he
sports.
Yeah, he was. Seemed to me, he had more young ideas than a lot of the neighbors. My friend's dad.
Yeah.
He was more of a sport.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah. And then he was kind of curious about new things, so he was always getting good machinery, new machinery,
Yeah.
the latest kind of seed corn. And
I think we were the first ones to start to plow with a tractor.
okay.
And
I remember him telling about how he got meeting with the big shots out there in Pierre, having to do with REA and trying to get the dams and the electricity to the farmers.
Yeah, he got on the REA board then, and that was when it was in its infancy, you know.
Yeah.
They were trying to get it organized, and I'm not sure it can ever be a complete success, because it isn't like in town where it's probably 10 feet between connections. Out here, it's 10 miles, you know, in a
That's
lot
right.
of cases.
Yeah.
And
But he was really interested in modernizing the farm countryside.
of course, everybody was then.
Yeah.
You know, we were one of the very last places on earth, I think, to get electricity. Minnesota and Iowa, some places, they'd had it for years.
Yeah. Do you remember the year when you got electricity? Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact
Maybe
year.
1950.
1950?
1950, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, I think it was, my memory was about 1949 when they came in with the poles. So in 49, 50 probably when they were
Yeah, that
putting
could
them
be.
up. So
What
that's-
about Grandpa's, did he fix things? I heard you talk about that once. He could fix a machine.
Yeah,
or something.
he went to automobile school in Omaha when he was a kid. So he wasn't afraid to tear an engine apart. And in fact, some of the older people that were 30, 40, 50 years older than he was, they used to come and ask him for advice, you know, when they'd have car trouble or something. In them days, you know, the cars were relatively new.
Mhm.
Like my dad, he grew up and went from horse and buggy, and that was just literally all they had, to seeing somebody land on the moon. And no time ever before in history has anybody ever gone through such drastic changes as that is.
Talk about the horses, some of the horses you guys had,
Oh yeah, we
farmed them and stuff.
we raised our own, and that was really fun. They little colts. They were fun to play with. They were a little dangerous because an animal is never completely safe, but they were fun. We had runaways there once in a while too, you know. But we broke our own, and they were good, gentle horses.
You boys all did it, or Grandpa did it?
No, Grandpa did it.
Oh.
Yeah, Grandpa, and a lot of times, my grandpa,
Oh, canoe.
Grandpa Lundgren, he used to
Oh,
stay at our
Grandpa
place
Lundgren.
quite a bit, you know.
Oh.
And they'd get out there and, boy, they'd go 100 miles an hour for a while sometimes, but
What kind were these?
what kind of horses?
Yeah.
Belgians. The
Oh.
stallions were Belgians. The mares were just horses. And they were a little of everything, I think.
Kind of a mixture, workhorse type.
Yeah. Well, they were all workhorses, but, you know, the stallion that Dad used most of the time was owned by Frank Christensen. He was a chestnut sorrel Belgian. He was really a pretty horse. And the colts were pretty too, most of them. But there wasn't anything in the world more fun than if you had a good set of horses. They were, you could almost go to sleep on the implements, you know, because they just learned what was expected of them. I planted corn when we first moved over there in that section place. I planted 235 acres of corn with one team, and I could have slept from end to end, you know. They just, that pole, they just took it right down the mark, you know.
Was it you that told about the dust storm and getting back home?
Oh, I come home, I think I was in the 5th grade, and I come home and Dad was about half done dragging the field right south of the house, and he had gentle horses, you know. During the 30s, that most of the horses were pretty gentle. They didn't get enough to eat to be frisky, you know. And I went over and asked him if I could drag. Yeah, he said, there's no reason why you can't. He said, I'll go home. He showed me how to watch the mark, you know. he said, I'll go home, and he said, Ma wants to go to town get something. He said, I'll take her in, and he said, I'll be right back. He said, I'll be back before you're done. So I was dragging away, and I saw it looked like a rain cloud coming in the northwest. I didn't pay any attention to it, you know, it rained once a year then, whether you needed it or not. And so I thought, well, that's nothing to worry about. And I kept on dragging, and all at once it just hit like a wall. It was dust storm. And I couldn't see the horses. I absolutely couldn't see the horses. So I thought, well, the first thing I had to do is to unhook the horses so they from the drag, you know, because I knew I couldn't turn them against that. Because when it hit, we were going away from it, and I put up the tugs. Dad had told me one time that horses would, in a blizzard, they'd take you home. You just let them alone, they'd take you home. So I thought, well, might as well try it in a dust storm. And I hung on to the lines, you know, and you absolutely couldn't face that. It was just, you know, like sandpaper hitting in the face. And I couldn't hardly get them to turn the right way to go down the fence line toward home, but they did. And all of a sudden they stopped, and I ran into them. You know, I didn't realize it. I couldn't hardly see them. And here was Dad coming hand over hand down the fence line, trying to find me. And he took the horses apart and sent them home, and threw me on top of one old horse, and then he jumped on, and we rode him home. And they did. We covered our face. He couldn't see. He absolutely could not see. And they took us home.
Wow.
Stopped by the barn.
Yeah,
So that was quite a relationship you ended up with those horses, to be able to trust your life with them.
Well, you really got quite a relationship with horses anyhow. You had to be smarter than they were, because you could kill them. You could drive them till you killed them. And you had to know when enough was enough, you know.
You told a story about trying to drive the horses into the barn and they wouldn't go in that time?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that was Jelmer.
Well, Jelmer did that.
Yeah, and well, Carl was the one driving the horses, and he took. Well, I guess either Carl or Dad. Anyhow, they took the horses apart and they run to the tank and drank like they always do. And then there was a big ornery on. You know, the horses have pecking order too. You know, there's some that are ornery and some that are let them be ornery, I guess. And he just would not go in. And he said, I even whacked that one ornery one. He said, he just kind of bucked and kicked. Well, he thought there must be something wrong in there. He walked up there, and there Jelmer was sleeping. He was a little kid, you know. He was sleeping right inside of the door. They wouldn't step on him.
that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that was the older generation's story that you heard.
Yeah, that was the older generation story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you remember the dust storms there with them horses, I know my dad talked about, and I don't know if you would have remembered this or not, where the grandpa must have gone to buy a binder or something somewhere and found a couple of them that the banks or whoever it was that owned them.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of that?
Well, all I remember is that he said the one they bought, ended up buying, all they could see was the very, very top. You know, they stood up that high at least. All I could see was just a little bit of the top boards, guide boards, and had to dig it out.
It was all under dirt.
Under dust.
Yeah.
Well, on the way to Huron, there's a place right after you go through Forestburg and turn left, you know, that there's still dunes, dust, and they're pure dust. They weren't there before the 30s. Dust mountains. Up around Huron was, I think, really the worst.
Yeah. How do you figure Andrew could still hang on to the farm during them days? When
Well, he didn't own a farm.
He just didn't own a farm.
Well, there were very few people that did own them. But yeah, insurance companies own most of them. But they if you were, he was living on a farm that a lady in Iowa owned, and but most of those that were on insurance company farms, they ended up buying them at a real reasonable price. So you were really lucky almost if you were on a insurance company farm.
Yeah. And Grandpa never bought
No.
a farm, basically.
No.
When you were in the 30s, you always talked about having a lot of good things to eat, and you had a good garden or whatever.
Oh, I don't know why. There were times when we didn't even pull out the binder, but we always had a good garden, big garden. She'd canned and canned and canned.
Did you water the garden then in those dirty days?
I can't remember. They must have done some of that because I don't see how they could have been so good if they hadn't.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
You weren't doing the watering the garden if it happened.
No, the only thing I watered was used to raise quite a few hogs, and you had to carry the water over to the hog house. So that got to be a lot of work.
That was your job then. So.
Well, mine and the rest of it too.
Yeah.
Talk about the days in the schoolhouse when you used to go skating down the river, got away from the teacher.
Oh, that was the wildest bunch of kids you ever saw.
Tell us where this school was first.
Well, the school was down where Gordon Berman's house is, right in that corner.
I'm not sure if people 100 years from now will know that.
Well, that I don't know either.
Is it which direction, like from Center Lutheran?
From Center would be
4 miles.
4 miles.
4 miles east.
East.
4 miles east of Center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of a low area down there.
And
Okay.
everybody had skates. And I don't know why, but during the 30s even, the sloughs were full. Of course, we didn't have a rain ever. We always had a storm. Whenever it didn't break loose, you know, it'd be a 3-4 incher. So a lot of it would go to the sloughs. I suppose that's why. You could still dry out, you know. But we used to go out there and skate. And we got one teacher that was just a little bit older than the kids, really, you know. And we'd get out there and skate and get so far away that we couldn't hear the bell, you know. And skate all afternoon for me. Yeah. And then in the spring when the ice got rubbery, why, you'd come down the bank and skate and the ice would just sink under you. And Leonard Lungen come down and poof, he went through the hole and slid under the ice for I don't know how far. But Ernie Chris and some of the bigger kids were there and they broke the ice and got him out right away, so he was all right. But yeah,
Well, that was a little dangerous there.
it was a little dangerous. It was a little dangerous just going to that school. They had a drifter. There was a lot of those in those days. Drifter that come and he went to school. His name was Sherman Sweezy. And he had a knife with a blade on about that long. First thing he done when he got to school, he had a red stocking cap. He cut the tassel off of that thing. And he had that knife with him all the time. And we gave him all the room he needed.
That's an interesting story in light of schools now, you know,
Yeah.
worried about guns and knives at
Yeah.
school. So here was a guy that was carrying a knife
Yeah,
in your day.
back in that day.
Yeah, so he got all the room. He probably got A's by the teacher, right?
I don't know. I don't know how she could stand it. Well, I can't see how in the world those teachers put up with what they did. They were the janitor and everything, you know. And I don't even think they had a telephone in them schools.
How were they heated? Were they heated with wood?
They were heated with coal. And maybe just enough wood to start the fire. But that was a tremendous responsibility. Didn't have any well around there, so any of the water they needed, and there was about 20 kids there, and all the water they needed to carry from Charlie Peterson's or Grayson's,
You had to bring your own water then?
No, didn't bring our own water in. We'd go there and get it.
Did you ride the horse over to school, or did you?
Some.
Some?
Yeah.
Do you walk most of the other
Walk
time?
most of the time we walked, yeah. That's a funny thing, I really get a chuckle out of people my age or a little older, you know, and they're talking about their grandchildren, how nice they got it, you know. They always walk. Everybody in the world would live 2 miles from school, you know, and walk during a blinding snowstorm, but it wasn't quite that bad. But basically you did walk almost every day. Cold, it could get cold, it never stopped you.
What kind of clothes do you wear then?
Well, sheepskin coats, and they had scarves you tied on them. You could stay warm. They had warmer clothes then than they have now.
No, that was important.
Yeah, that was very
Yeah.
important.
No heated cars and
No heated
things like
cars.
that we got now.
I even drove to school in an old Model A Ford, and they had a hot air heater. The air come across the manifold, but it burned the legs on the guy right in front of it, and the rest of the people never got a thing. But we survived that too.
Yeah. When you went to school, besides ice skating, which sounds like it was your favorite
It
subject,
was, yeah.
was there anything else you enjoyed?
Oh, we played ball. You know, played ball and played in the wintertime, played fox and goose or poured a little water on a plank we used to have, let that freeze, and then you'd run, we'd sit it on there was a kind of a high bank. Sit it on that bank, and boy, you could just zip.
Sit on that plank and zip down the hill?
No, you'd go on your feet, you'd run and then jump on it, you know. And I don't know why somebody didn't kill themselves.
Oh, so it was...
But they never did.
Okay, so it was like standing up on this plank with the
standing
ice
up,
on the bottom
yeah,
side?
Yeah. So it
And
was
that
just,
really
oh, it was just absolutely slick as a peeled onion.
And that went downhill ways then.
Yeah, I went downhill, yeah.
No kidding. How many miles did it go?
Well, I didn't go,
See that.
it didn't go miles, but it
Oh, man.
went quite a ways. But like
Wow.
I say, it was, the school where I went was actually too many kids in there for
The teacher.
one
huh?
teacher, yeah.
Do you remember about how many kids would have been in the school at that
Well,
time?
up to 22, 24,
And this was all different grades?
all
too?
8 grades.
All 8 grades.
But you know, they couldn't wait to get rid of them. But I still say that was the best method of education there was. When all the while I went through high school, most of the kids that got honors, like salutatorian or valedictorian, come out of these country schools. But you know, you from the time you were a first grader on up, you could hear what was going on in the grades above you, you know. And even though you could kind of try and concentrate on what you were doing, you still heard it. And I really believe that those that were, I wasn't a good student, but those that were, they really become good students.
And the older kids, did they kind of help the younger kids some on their work? Do you remember?
Well, if the teacher asked them to, but most of the time
Most
they
of the
didn't.
time, okay, so. And she just would take each class or each group and
Yeah.
give them some of their lessons?
Yep, had a bench up there and a curtain they put across, but you know, that didn't.
The rest of you were unsupervised and just sitting there then
Yeah.
studying whatever.
Yeah.
So did you ever throw spit wads?
Right, the county superintendent come once, and it was such an uproar in the school. She was going to straighten things out, and she walked up and down the aisles. And when she walked down my aisle, I went and took a wad of paper and put it in the wastebasket. She waited for me. When I got back, she whacked it one of them little record books, you know, about that wide and about that long. Not a hardcover, but a semi-hard cover. She whacked me across the snoot with that thing. Yeah, but it didn't do any good.
Didn't do any good, huh?
That school was still, but I don't know, it never got so far out of line that you couldn't study though.
Was that about in the Norwegian area of the community then, or were there some Swedes there too, or was it kind of?
Well, it was almost mixed, yeah, it was almost everything. Petrie's, I don't know what nationality they would be really. And Bellicks and Christians, they were Dane. And Andersons, they were Swede. And I think they were mostly Swedes, so.
So it was a pretty free-for-all kind of environment then for education.
It was.
Yeah.
Actually, it was looking back on it, it was a ball.
Yeah. So a lot of that activity was a lot of fun that you're all having.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. If you got a bad teacher, then that was kind of bad because you had to go into Salem and take your finals, you know. And if you had a teacher that didn't have the ability to keep enough discipline so you could learn, you were in deep trouble.
So you went into Salem from your little school to take your
Yeah.
final exams.
Yeah.
Was that in 8th grade you went in there?
7th and 8th, I believe it was.
You went into Salem in 7th grade?
Yeah, I think so. Just the exams.
Oh, when did you start high school, or when did you move out of the country school then? When?
Freshman year.
Oh.
Yeah. Did first graders go into Salem to take exams too then?
No, just the 7th and 8th.
Just the 7th and 8th, okay.
I'm not sure if it was the 7th either, but the 8th grade did, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, you couldn't graduate, you know.
Did you remember any particular subject matter that you did like when you were a student?
Oh, I loved reading.
Okay.
No, I just loved reading, but everything else, it took so much time out of your entertainment that I didn't care for it at all.
Good point. Who were some of your friends in those days that you remember, and what did you do together?
Well, in the grade school days, you know, with the transportation and one thing and another, outside of school, you could just have been 100 miles apart, you know. So I really didn't. Lyle Howard Church was really them days, that was the hub of everything. For everybody. The activity, that if you're going to have some good friends and so on, usually they come out of church. And Lyle Howe, he was my best friend. We had more fun in grade school years, you know, high school years, and I still had a lot of fun with him, but Bud Goswick and some of the others besides.
No, he was Montrose guy, wasn't he, Bud Goswick?
No, he was Salem.
Yeah. So, well, do you remember any particular events? You had a couple of them there whacking across the nose there at that one point. Or any other particular memories of that school as far as what might have been kind of unusual?
No, not really.
What about the Racine boys?
Yeah, the Racine boys.
Racine boys. Okay.
Yeah, they were a big family up north, and none of them could speak English.
Okay.
When and I'd like to see a teacher do that nowadays. Every student they got out of there, she had to teach them English first.
Wow.
And they still, they passed. I think Viola was almost an honor student when she graduated.
Did you speak English when you started school?
I didn't speak Swede at all.
You never spoke Swede at all?
No, my folks, we're Americans. We don't.
No.
But once in a while, when they thought everybody was in bed or something, they'd speak Scandinavian between the two of them, you know. But no, they wouldn't. I actually wanted to learn Swede or Norwegian. No, you don't need that.
Yeah, because my dad, I think he was speaking a little Swede when he was before school.
Oh, maybe he did.
Yeah, I think he did. I didn't even know that until recently. But
Well, I didn't either. I didn't know that, but I know I didn't.
By the time you got around, that was all English then.
It was all English, boy. They were Americans.
Yep.
And that's the way that ended. So,
Did- You mentioned the church as a place where you kind of had your good friends and stuff. Do you remember the kind of activities? Like, did you have Luther leagues or
Oh,
youth
yeah.
group
Yeah.
things those days?
we had a Luther League and even kids from other denominations would show up at Luther League. And they played games, and it was a place to go boy-girl, you know, in Luther League, in your teens. I think you had to, see, it feel like you had to be confirmed or something
Yeah, I bet they did.
to start Luther League,
Yeah.
and that was a, well, like I say, it was the hub of everything that went on during the 30s, because I grew up in the 30s. I was born in 24, so in 34 I was 10 years old. So I virtually grew up in the 30s.
Would you say you're about 10 when that dust storm came? Was that about 34? When you were talking about dragging?
Probably about 34.
So you could have been 10 years old out running.
Yeah,
that,
I could have been 10
equipment.
years old.
Yeah.
But, you know, them old gentle horses that we had, when you said, oh, that's what they did, they stopped, you know. And that was,
Yeah. Was that about as young as you were when you did some farm work, or do you remember doing it younger?
no, I don't really remember doing it younger. He had 3 old horses that I used to play with. He'd put the harness on at noon, and I'd come out there with a sulky plow and fiddle around a little bit, you know, but it didn't, not to really work. I didn't work, but he'd let you play with it,
Get used to it.
get used to it. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so.
You remember, like back to church at confirmation time? Do you remember how did they do that confirmation them days? Did you have to go once a week, or did they?
Once a week on Saturday.
On Saturday.
Saturday 4 an hour.
Okay. Was it like for how long a time? Like a year, or was it less or more?
No, it wasn't any more than that, I don't think. But it was about a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it kind of boring? I imagine you.
Well, it was just, you know, it was school, and
Yeah.
I never was real fond of school. In fact, my dad, he begged me to go to college, and I wasn't smart enough to do that, which was a real bonehead on my part.
You regret that today?
Well, yeah, sure. You know, I could have, any of us could have. Dell too, Dell said I think they even took him down to Augustana. And in a few days, he called and told him to come and get him. He had enough school. But,
Set the pattern for the rest of
yeah, he set the pattern for the rest of us, that's right. But I don't know, it wasn't any great need for college education then, but you know, it was still a good thing.
And that was something that was it Grandpa that wanted you to
Yeah,
go
it
to
was Grandpa,
school?
yeah.
He was pro-education. then.
Oh, I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he never had himself much education.
No, he only went to the 5th grade. But to the day he died, he could do mathematics as good as anybody I ever saw.
Of course, he did continuing education, we'd call it today, if
Well,
he went
yeah,
to that
yeah.
mechanics school.
Yeah, he did that.
Yeah.
And but he boy, he could you couldn't fool him as far as mathematics are concerned. You know,
Yeah.
so, but that's continuing education too. If you're a farmer, you have to do that, you know.
Learning is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh. Well, during them 30s was pretty tough financially, I'm sure, for everybody to make it through, and then the
Well, I felt, you know, knowing what I know now, I feel sorry for the folks that had to go through that. But to be growing up through that, it was a good time to grow up. Everybody was in the same shape, you know. Like today, there's some people that have absolutely nothing, and some people that have so much money they don't know what to do with it. That's different. But if everybody is in the same boat, you don't know you're poor.
Everybody
Yeah.
pulls together, I bet.
Everybody pulled together, neighbors needed neighbors, and they did. But like, for the parents, it had to be really tough. Because I'm sure there had to be times when they wondered what in the world are we gonna eat? Or burn, and them days, there wasn't any, no big government program to fall back on, boy, you were on your own. And, farmers help, neighbors help neighbors, you know. But like I say, I had a good time all my life. Growing up, you know, I didn't feel like I missed a thing.
So that was sad. So you look back on your life with a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd have done any different, really.
Yeah.
You know, except going to college. I wished I had done that.
Yeah.
But did you do any hunting in those days, or did you hunt?
Yeah, well, everybody hunted in those days. There were so many pheasants that you almost could. Oh, that was. Lyle Howe and I took a couple of old single barrel shotguns out and just walked in the stubble field, just right across the road from the house. And we got 7 in, I'm sure it wasn't a half hour. They were just thick.
So pheasants was a big,
I don't know if anybody didn't hunt pheasants.
Jackrabbits.
Well, there was a lot of jackrabbits too for a little while, but
did you ever hunt deer much?
no. I hunted a couple years, so.
Yeah.
But you ate all the pheasants. I suppose you go out in the winter and even get a pheasant and eat it.
Well, you could have if you wanted to, but they had so many chickens
Yeah.
and you know, pork, hogs were so cheap that sometimes didn't hardly pay the feed. We had all the pork we wanted. We always had all the meat. I can never ever in my life remember going to bed hungry. Never. That's one thing I think the farmers had farmers had the advantage, you know, because we had chickens and had pork, and sometimes they'd butcher a beef, but they were so big that, you know, without the refrigeration, it was so hard to take care of.
So yeah, that's another thing about, you didn't have electricity.
No.
You didn't have indoor plumbing, right?
No.
And therefore, without electricity and indoor plumbing, you didn't have refrigeration.
Nope.
You didn't have.
I don't know how they did it.
Well, how did they do it?
Well, I don't know. You know, we always had meat. We had meat for almost every meal.
Did they can? Did they can it? Or?
Yeah, my mother canned a lot of meat, and then they'd salt down some of the things. I don't know how they done that, but they had one of these big crocks and they'd salt down meat. But you know, I can't remember ever anybody before refrigeration. I can never remember anybody getting salmonella poisoning. You know, now boy, you have to just about wear surgical gloves to fry a hamburger, you know, or somebody will get sick. And it wasn't that way then.
Yeah.
And you know, no refrigeration. I don't know how they done it. Of course, I think the food they prepared, they ate all that same day. Probably have boiled potatoes at noon and then fry the leftover potatoes at night or something like that.
Yeah.
I always remember Grandpa. It was so unusual for me to see him eat Carol syrup and
He liked
bread
it.
or something.
I did not like that, but he did that. Yeah.
I remember Carol syrup too.
Yeah.
It was corn syrup, right?
Yeah.
Grandma,
I guess when he was at home, they'd done that a lot.
Grandma liked pickled herring.
Oh, did she ever? Or pickled pig's feet, or something like that. Well, my brother Dale does too. He buys that stuff. Boy, I tell you.
Did you ever go like, I remember that we'd always have our meat in the locker when I was growing up. Did they have the locker plant in Salem much during the 30s, do you think?
No.
That was something that came later.
That came later.
That came later.
Yeah. No, I don't know what they'd of course, that was another company affair. You know, the neighbors go together with neighbors, and I know they'd butcher 2-3 hogs in a certain, you know, when they had a week where they weren't real busy in the field or something. Like Elvin Schrader and Dad and some of the other neighbors too sometimes would get together, and Carl and some of his brothers, you know, and they'd butcher 2-3 hogs for different people, you know. Although Leona's dad tells about when he was growing up, they used to butcher, I think he said, as high as 7 hogs at a time. But they took care of them, you know, and nobody ever died from them. Well, Dad said when they come to this country and he'd go out in the field, he said the water was so clear you could see the bottom any place. He said more than once he got so thirsty he just couldn't wait till he got home. He took a drank right out of a little puddle or stream or something. And he said it was just crystal clear. So
Pollution wasn't a problem those days.
pollution was no problem. He didn't get sick from it.
Before we messed it all up, I suppose.
I guess we did. Well, that's one thing people do, I guess.
Do you remember much about harvesting, threshing, that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, we had a thrash run, and all the neighbors went together and furnished a bundle rack, and eight bundle racks, and I'd done that for quite a few years. And then Dad done some stack thrashing afterwards. I helped with that too.
How? So after you were married, you did the threshing too, right?
We did for a couple of years, didn't we, Leona?
She's not in listening, I guess. But
No.
anyway, so you did there too, but mostly it was Grandpa who was doing the threshing.
Well, yeah, and he didn't run the thrashing machine toward the last, but he bought a combine and started combining too. So
he was one of the first ones to get a combine, you
yeah, he
think?
was one of the first ones to get a combine.
And you did custom stack thrashing, meaning they had already stacked it somewhere.
They'd already stacked it.
Then your grandpa would come in with it.
Zingmarks, Algot and Albert Zingmark and Felix were the ones we stack thrash for usually. And then we stack thrash for some people by the name of Wise over there when we got to Montrose. But that was really hard work and hot and dirty.
Yeah.
I didn't like that too good.
So you guys all went with a package? In other words, you did the
No, not necessarily.
Oh.
We got paid if we'd done the pitching. We got paid. Yeah.
Then there was probably a few sweaty days stacking the hay. Is that probably true?
Oh yeah. Them days that we used to, at least Dad did. Of course, we were quite a few boys. You know, we'd throw it in the rack and haul it home and stack it at home.
So you brought the hay home next to the barn or something?
Yeah.
So, and you pitched it out of the stack over the winter to feed the cows?
Yeah.
Did Grandpa mostly have milk cows, or did he have beef cows?
He had the same thing everybody else had during the 30s. He scrub cows, and you milked them. No matter what they looked like, you milked them. Some would be roan, and some white face, and I think what they were, if they were related to any breed, it'd be milking shorthorn.
Okay.
Yeah. But some of them milk a pailful.
And then, did he sell them off for beef ever? I mean, I don't know how that
Oh yeah,
worked.
the steers, they'd feed them a little grain, and it wasn't until, I think almost in the late 40s that you see very many herds of straight Holstein or straight Guernsey or Jersey or something.
Yeah. So it was pretty diversified. So you had chickens, you had...
Chickens, pigs, and cows. Everybody had chickens and pigs and cows. And when they went to the town to do their grocery shopping, they brought in their eggs and their cream, because the milk, that was generally fed to the hogs. It wasn't until, well, much later around here at least, where they sold anything but cream. And after they started selling the milk, they got more for it, of course. And that's when they went to the Holsteins, because they don't milk quite as rich a milk as some of this, but they put in a lot of milk, and that was, of course, the goal.
So, what, Saturday night, was that or Friday night?
Saturday night was everybody in the world was in town Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where you brought the eggs and the cream and
Yeah.
bought your groceries. And,
Yeah, that's for sure.
Drug me.
yeah, so got
Yeah.
to be kind of the social weekend.
Well, it was a social weekend, yeah. If you didn't go to town Saturday night, boy, what people were wondering if you were sick, you know.
So it was kind of like Saturday night. I suppose that's where the Saturday bath came in, huh?
Maybe it was, yeah, I suppose it was, yeah.
Cleaned up before you went to town.
Yeah.
And then Sunday morning you,
Didn't have to take a bath.
yeah, you went to
Well,
church. Yeah.
During thrashing, we,
Does anybody want some watermelon?
yes, please. I've got such a headache that I just about can't continue this here much
Okay.
longer.
Well, we can quit here,
But during thrashing, we used to put up sometimes a 50-gallon barrel up on a stand, and then boy, during the 30s, the hot sun just about boiled it, you know, and we'd have a shower when we got home, and that worked pretty good.
that was a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can quit this. Appreciate you doing it.
Yeah.